Up
share
Wave.
this episode.
You know, with
leave
all
us
the
a
dark,
review,
scary
just keep
things
tuning
happening
in.
in the world right now,
Every wave you catch
might be feeling
matters.
And remember, what we focus
But beneath
on
the surface,
actually
there's
expands.
something very powerful happening.
We are all
It's
an
very
awakening.
deeply connected.
I'm Jay Pryor, spiritual seeker, life coach, and teacher.
And I'm Megan Lee, a 7th generation seer and medium. We're bringing our gifts to this present moment.
Exploring our own awakening and talking with leaders, healers, and visionaries who are helping others wake up as well.
We're also diving into the neuroscience of the woo-woo, exploring how science is finally catching up with the spiritual and helping explain it.
We believe that what we focus on expands and that we are all deeply connected.
Welcome to your awakening.
Welcome to the Wake Up Wave. We are thrilled to be with our friend and one of our town's leaders right now. Megan and I live in a small area, so our friend Monique is a very powerful leader in our community right now, especially during these times we need her. And we are blessed to know her through that way. And also, we know you, the two of us, are friends with you in a very spiritual context too. So all the reasons and all the things that we want to hear from, and we're excited to have you on the Wake Up Wave. So welcome to the show.
Yay, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Monique, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your pronouns, so we know how to address you, as well as, what do you consider woke to be?
Oh my, we're just going in heavy, guys. I use they, them pronouns. I'm not as assertive as maybe I should be. I'm kind of on the fence of whether I should be or not, because right now I'm in the feeling of let them address me how they're going to address me because they don't see me coming. So, I'm just kind of moving in that way. And I think that's a very big part of wokeness. I'm entering spaces that I have always avoided, any kind of political, bureaucratic, it's just not me. But I'm beginning to understand that everything that I've come through up until this point has gotten me ready to walk in those spaces without compromising who I am, what I believe in, and how I'm moving and how I'm being called to move. And that's in a very, matriarchal way. And I just, really have been reflecting on my experiences, my lived experiences, and how they have very specifically given me hand-carved tools to move in the ways that I am right now.
So when do you feel like your path of, being awakened, or the difference between being awakened and living woke in that way kind of hit you? And how do you kind of see that projected around you?
I think previously, and when I speak previously, I would say really recently within the last 6 months to year, I was experiencing things that were leveling me up, that were really difficult to move from, that really made me have to look at how capable I truly am, and not fall into negative, mind traps. And I would take them as bits of things to consume, sort through that, figure out, what's for me, what's not for me, put down what I don't need and move on. And now, especially in these past 6-7 months specifically, I feel like every single day I am Neo, constantly having, getting ready for these people, these energies, these conversations, to come my way, and to actively be mindful about the lessons I've come through, paying attention to the energies that flood my body when I enter certain rooms or engage in conversations with certain people. It's really trying to actively allow my higher self to be the guide in all of this, and not move from an ego place where I realize can sometimes be led in a fearful way without us, paying attention.
I love that you, in that single response, have hit on everything that Jay and I have been talking about in our prior podcasts and on our Substack, and what we are coaching and teaching is what you have just said about leveling up, paying attention, being aligned with yourself.
Yes. It's definitely uncharted territory. And, one of the other things that's extremely loud is the very specific people that have shown up in not a You know, when you get to this kind of level of paying attention to what's on the other side of the veil, I guess, people come across instead of as lessons, you know, either they're lessons or blessings. I'm having some really, really strong connections of mentorship on a different level. And that's, you know, where I've connected with both of you. The friendships that we share are so elevated in the way that I can't compare them to any other friendships I've had previously. Acknowledging them and identifying them, you know, it's weird because like I know you, but like how, why? Like, you know, it's proceed with caution, but it feels safe and it's good. Of the conversations and the things that we've had and shared, it's been instrumental, I hope, to all of us in the way that we move in this world, because, you know, each of us carry a very specific task that we're here to do.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that's important, that, you know, the thing that I think is powerful, and having had you, my friend Monique, as my friend for a very short time, really, in the grand history of life. And we've gone pretty deep with each other because, like you said, we have a very powerful spiritual connection. And so I don't know how much you want to share, but I would love to have you share a little bit about like where you come from and what you're working through and toward, and then, you know, how our relationship has evolved through that, because, you know, we've had some pretty, you called me a trauma doula once. I thought that was interesting. I've never had that in there before. um, but we've had really powerful connections around that. And one of the things that Meg and I are really committed to, and I think that you can speak really well to, is how part of awakening is facing our own shadows and facing all of these things, and sometimes that are pretty painful and uncomfortable, but that it occurs like that is really part of ours to do in this skin. One of the things that we're exploring is how much of this is ours to do, like in this iteration on this timeline. What are we healing? What do we do? You know, like some of that stuff. And I think your story is so powerful around that. So I'd love to hear as much of your story as you'd be willing to share.
Well, thank you for all of that. I come with trigger warnings.
Mm-hmm.
So all of them are everywhere at all times. So just no conversations like that. I don't ever really feel the need to hold back, only because my experience has so vastly shaped me to be a specific vessel, you know, to carry on, you know, the things that I need to carry on. I definitely come from a very young single mother who faced her own adversities that were something that she was never able to really own and come through and come to terms with and do the shadow work of. And, you know, unfortunately, that's caused a rift between us. And, you know, not having any of the matriarchs or anybody from my mother's side of the family or otherwise connected to me has left me out in this world in a way that it's been difficult. It's been hard. But even when I was with them, even in my younger years, I remember being alone. I remember feeling alone in a room full of people, but I remember always being watched. That feeling, knowing I've never, ever, ever truly been alone. And from a young age, it used to scare me. I used to change my clothes or get dressed out of the tub under my blankets all of the time because I was watched. But it wasn't fearful. I just wanted privacy. But I knew they were there and they were always there. And it hadn't been till I came back full circle through all of the trauma, through all of the life experiences, and sat down with my shadow self and looked back at all of the ways that those watchers got me through some really horrific times, some things that absolutely should have broken me. I should not be standing. And I'm here for a reason. And I know that that reason is to be in service, to heal, you know, to bring back a matriarchal understanding of society, of community. And I think being on the outside of that, living in such patriarchal spaces, being expected to rise up to patriarchal standards and exceed them in order to be valid enough to go to the next level has really made me want to be like, ew, ick. I'm not doing that. I did that for so long. I've compromised who I am so much to the point where I literally lost myself entirely. Motherhood was that candle in the dark that brought me back in a way that, you know, kept me on the path of nurturing, of matriarchy, of that real raw experience of bringing a human into this world and what that mean. And the fact that I had 2 boys, never in my life have I to this day had a man, be it, a father figure, uncle, whatever, stand by me the entire way through. So all of those things have led up to, me becoming so aware of what I deserve, how I deserve to be treated, how I deserve to be approached, and the people I deserve to be around. I think that in itself has really helped me narrow down how and why I need to show up for community, and why I'm still here in Lawrence, how that even played out, because that was literally 2 days before we were supposed to get orders to somewhere. The Topeka billet came on the list of possibilities. So I really truly believe that all of the things that I've walked through, all of the fires, all of the depths of the dark places, has brought me here to step into these spaces to bring this very, specific heart of our country, if you will, back to the awakening of the power that we have as a people, the way that we move, the way that we connect as, communities. Yes, we're different. I feel like, we've been so segregated in so many different ways, but putting people of, minority spaces in places of leadership is changing the way that we operate in such a way that it's making us pay attention to the patriarchal patterns that we subconsciously have been subscribing to. And that is a hard thing for people to chew on. That is a hard thing for people to even consider swallowing, because that's a lot of accountability. That's a lot of truths. And I feel like because I've had to so profoundly get through that, looking back at a hyperspeed to where I'm working with grown adults, sometimes even older than me, that can't even comprehend having a conversation of why community involvement on all levels is important. So being able to hold the space to educate people, especially, cis het people, their minds are in a different way. I think being, an Indigenous person, being a queer person, being a weird person has given me all of the, perspectives that I need in order to move through these spaces. Look, there was no trauma there, guys. Wow.
I love it.
I love that.
I love it. And so powerful. So, just for our viewers, how do you take that personal healing, that mind, body, soul, emotional healing, and what do you do now with that in the community? Like you're speaking about community and community spaces and things like that. Like, what is community to you?
Man, community to me is... So I had a taste of it growing up. I was born in Salem, Oregon. I am from the Ohlone Coast-Known Esselen Nation. That is a California tribe. All of my family is from the California, Monterey Bay area. But I would say about my mom's freshman year of high school, my grandma sent her up to Chemawa, which is an Indian boarding school in Oregon, Salem, Oregon. Because back in those days, if you didn't identify as Hispanic, there's going to be fights. Brown pride was a really big thing in California then, and if you were Native or identifying as anything other than, it was a problem. And my mom obviously wasn't ready to, say that she was something that, she wasn't. And that's when my grandma sent her off. So being born up there she had me shortly after she graduated her senior year. But that community that she gained, that intertribal community through Chemawa, was a lot like Haskell. For me growing up, I was constantly surrounded with kids that looked like me, kids that had stories, similar to mine. We would get together twice a week for years, and we would learn how to bead, we would sing, we would drum. Like, we did everything. Us kids did everything. And all of the tribal teachings from everybody were always accepted, and nobody got critiqued. And we traveled along the powwow trail. Like, it was the most wonderful time of my life. It was the most cherished time that I can think of growing up. Unfortunately, we had to flee Salem, and that left me on the Oregon coast alone in a town that had more cows than people. So that was the first time I experienced racism. It was the first time I experienced such an ugly level of hate because of the color of my skin that was looking at end times, on top of why we had to flee from Salem. And I feel like ever since then, I've not been surrounded by the community that I feel my spirit has been calling to. And gosh, I lived in Tillamook for about 6-7 years before I married somebody in the military, and that got me out of there. So I've been bouncing around, literally never staying longer than anywhere than 4 years, and that's been since 2001. That first marriage was a doozy. It was a real tough one to get through. It was 16 years, and once I was able to grow past that and found the strength to really pay attention to who I was and what I needed to be doing and centering myself, because I had 2 little boys watching and I wasn't trying to be performative anymore. So I married somebody else in the military, but it happened to be a woman this time, and life has been different. Home is different. My relationships are different. And the way that I treat myself is different. And it's because of, living my truth as a queer person. And because of that relationship and that goodness and giving me a safe place to really dig down deep to do the work of all the things that I've been through. We were stationed here in Topeka. She works in Topeka. Everybody told us to move to Lawrence, so we listened. But we got here in June of 2020. And so it was still pretty isolating time. It was still, I was still very much a little tender around and just pissed off that we ended up in Kansas because we're in the Coast Guard. And I was like, where's the, cried about it. I was upset. And we were driving around and we passed Haskell, and I instantly cried because I remembered that emblem from my mom's yearbooks, and how she would tell me that the Haskell student teachers were some of the only safe people in that institution that, her and her friends were able to turn to. And so it was in that moment, when your whole world and life just floods and turns on a dime and narrows in, and there's clarity. So later that winter, November of 2020, there was an all-call Facebook ad hoc group looking for some folks to set up an Indigenous community center. I was like, there's my in. Okay, thanks, Creator. And I applied and got the position, and I worked with the Indigenous Community Center for a couple years and got super deep into community. I was able to, I've always been a jewelry designer. That was something that my mom and grandma had really, had always done. And I remember going to pop-ups with my grandma and stuff like that. So I had been doing this since 2001. But when I got here and I started selling and getting involved in community, I was supported in a way that I'd never been met before. Again, the goodness of the people, the healing, the what I deserves were really loud. And I just kept wanting to consume more of that, because I'm like, if I feel this good, how good are other people feeling if I'm showing up for them? So I started getting more and more involved. That led me into Art Love Collective, where that was a incredible space full of painful lessons that needed to be consumed in a different way. That led me to Douglas County Core. That was a really hard-earned relationship to begin with, but I think being able to be respected, honored, and valued for the path that I've walked, the experiences that I've had, and the voice that I lead with continues to keep me there, because I have to keep doing this work. I'm working with entrepreneurs, I think, at wider levels than a lot of people might consider is essential for healthy communities for so many reasons. And, unbeknownst to me, the economic impact is so profoundly important. I, have always worked in a grassroots way, and I always call my work crabgrass, because I feel like I get down in the grass and just kind of move parallel to the ground. I'm not trying to reach up and cause anybody to pay attention to me. I'm good. I'm just going to take care of my own. But I've gotten to the point where I can't, be that anymore. But the way that I move and the way that I understand hasn't always been up in those higher spaces. So understanding the work that I've been doing at a grassroots level instinctually, and how that impacts economic development and conversations that should be had on a Broadway so that's what I'm doing. That's how I got here.
I love it, because you're the kind of person that, when you speak, I get goosebumps, and there's things that you talk about that hit a a visceral level through people of color, and what those paths look like, but not just people of color, but also the queer realm as well. And being those, you kind of have to move differently. And that's why when you are speaking about those experiences that they hit multiple different genres all in one breath, and getting to address those is something that's really important to Jay and I.
I appreciate you both.
The other thing that I love to highlight about your story is how much, I mean, you just called it creator, right? Whatever you want to call it, right? How much that spirit, that God, that force, that source is always like laying out these, if we're paying attention, right? Like when you told the story, when you came to Kansas and you're mad at Kansas because we don't even have a code, we don't even have any water. That's the funniest damn thing, right? It's absolutely true, people. We are landlocked. No. You can't even get near any, I mean, except for lakes, right? We have a lot of lakes, but we have no water. And your partner's in the Coast Guard, and she gets assigned to Kansas, of all places, right? And then there's Haskell, and it wasn't clear to me in the beginning, but then obviously that was a full circle moment from your mom, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's totally accurate. And the thing that really stings is that there are so many things. There's so many things that I wish she was here for. Recently, I have dealt with some really ugly harassment to the point where I have a 2-year protective order against somebody because they are the way they are. But I remember my mother specifically telling me, watch out for those Lakota women. And I was like, I remember back in her Chihuahua days, she had some drama with this one girl who was Lakota, and it was very specific, and it wasn't anything, against the tribe. It was nothing like that. It was a very specific thing that she was telling me, and I didn't understand it until I came into orbit with this person here. And the way, her, just the bad medicine that leaks out of her felt so familiar to, something that was previous me, my mother's, loop. But there's so many very specific instances that I still am thanking my mother for, that I still, send her prayers about. I know she's on her own journey. It is what it is, but I miss her. But being here, of all places, someplace that I don't come from, my people don't come from here, man, it feels like home. And we were supposed to actually leave and be stationed somewhere else last month. We were supposed to go. So to think that, she was able to get on that second billet and got here for an additional 4 years, being here for a total of 9 years will be the longest I have ever stayed any one place in my entire life. And that is incomprehensible. But also, I feel like that comes with so much responsibility and honor. And I'm very, very humbled to be able to, stay here and to, continue to be in connection with my chosen family. You guys, it's a big deal for me. So it's wild. It's been wild.
Can you talk to some of those things that you use, tools that you use, or Jane and I have been talking about meditation or focuses that you use to, as those lessons come to you from your mom's past, from your own past, or, that frequency or vibe of people that you use to stay true to not only your own path and your own awakening, your own likeness, but back to the creator mindset.
Can you frame that for me?
Yeah. When you get tested in those lessons, what keeps you from spiraling out? Like, can you talk about those everyday tools that you use? Or do?
Yeah. I think my grandmother is probably the heaviest persuasion to stay grounded. I think that the very, very clear, specific memories I have of her growing up, I go there. And it's such a safe place that I don't want to bring negativity into it. So when I'm faced with things that either have me spiraling, have me triggered, have me, breathing deeply, I basically reach back and I grab my grandma's hand and I'm just like, I'm good, I'm okay. Like, these are, I break down what the triggers are, blueprint them. I look at them objectively and it really helps me stay steady. I definitely think that there are times where I do give space to those feelings of, I call them my tar pit traps, places that took me years to get out of, places that I know better than to even look at or open the door of because I know how powerful they still are. But being able to walk up to those doors and be like, nah, like having the ability to reach back and grab onto something, be it my community, be it my children, my wife, myself. Recently, I've been really being mindful about me being somebody that I can lean on. I think that staying accountable really helps me move forward because, man, I could easily not get up sometimes, especially after, some of the conversations that I'm in nowadays or the work that I see that is being done behind the scenes in our county and in our city. It breaks my heart and it makes me sick. And I absolutely don't want to, but I know I have to.
You also, when I've been with you, one of the things that I know, the tools that you use, which we've talked about, I think one of the things we said the other day is like everybody's having the same conversation, even though we're calling it different names. But like I was with you once when you put something in the ground, right? You gave it to the ground. And we've had times when we've been together when, like the last time we were together, we had a doe run right in front of us while we were together.
Okay.
And before that, there was like the buzzards, right? Like, so you use nature as a tool, it feels like to me, you use nature, and that might be just like you're so used to that because it's part of your spirituality. But for the rest of our listeners and things like that, could you share a little bit of some of those tools? Because I think even if it's, and I don't want to cultural appropriate, and this is why I'm like, Megan has talked a lot about, telling me to go put my feet in the ground and like get grounded and using the earth. But could you talk to that a little bit?
I absolutely can. Let me respond to my son real quick. They're the only two people I'll interrupt a Zoom or something for.
We get that.
The only things. So yeah, I think because it is so a part of me that I don't want to say I take it for granted, but it is so a part of me. I grew up outside. Mom made outside very friendly and safe for me at a very young age. It's a text from my son. To the point where even when she had gotten us into a situation that, might have been not good, fleeing to outside spaces was always going to be a consistent thing in my life. We spent a lot of the times in rivers and at the beach, and I grew up climbing trees. Like that was a big part of my childhood, camping primitively. My grandmother took it a step further and taught me about stone relatives and taught me about herbs and taught me about the moon and just how to communicate and move with them. And one of our favorite pastimes was we would look for four-leaf clovers together. And she would always take me to what it felt like specific places. And she would talk to Creator and just, welcome us and welcome Creator and just show gratitude. And she would literally bend over and pick up a four-leaf clover. And, as a young person, that completely blew my mind. Like I would spend hours and hours. But what she was giving me was hours and hours of time with myself to feel comfortable, to feel, just confident in ways that I didn't realize she was giving me. So with those things combined, it's been a very, very intimate relationship that I've grown that has saved me time and time again from awful relationships, terrible situations. There was a time that I probably shouldn't have come back. Without getting into it, I was taken and I shouldn't have come back. But the fact that I came back and how I came back speaks volumes to everything that Jay's referring to. So when I am struggling, when I am having a hard time, it's really hard to allow myself to slip into any bad repeated cycles because I can literally go outside and find a four-leaf clover. I'll find 3 if I'm having a really hard day and I'm like, nah, that was coincidence. Nah, that was coincidence. Okay, I'm listening. And it is so loud that I can't help it. It's a thing. And here in Kansas, We've been stationed in, gosh, Georgia, Florida, Virginia. I mean, all kinds of places. I've been out to Guam, other than, my own home where my blood comes from. Before Kansas, Guam was the only other place that I felt the earth the way that I did. In the South, it's hard to connect. There's a lot of pain there to move through. But here, I can't hide from it.
It's something I love about Kansas is that you don't have to go very far to get away.
Really? Which is weird because...
Yeah. No, it's the truth. I told Meg that story when I was in Washington, D.C. I got frustrated one day and I just got on 50 and kept driving. And I said, I'm going to drive until I can get to a place where I can be by myself. I drove for 2.5 hours and I turned around and went home because I was so frustrated. And in Kansas, you can get outside and out in the country, and at least where we are, pretty fast. You get by yourself, just be with nature.
It's a pretty big place, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things, though, that I want to highlight out of that conversation the most is your grandmother giving you access, because we all have access at different points in our lives. And I think our families, one of the biggest gifts our families give us, all three of us in this conversation, is permission to, and almost like a roadmap to connect to spirit or source, right? To have source be your source, like to have, when I'm walking with spirit every day and I'm on purpose connecting, like you just said, I'll go find some 4-leaf clovers, like, okay, spirit, I got it, right? Sometimes I have to be whacked in the head because this thing is the human, right? Nothing's going to get solved here. But I think that when your family gives you that connection, I think it's one of the most powerful gifts we can have. And throughout my 20 years of coaching people, the people that have the hardest time are people who don't have any roadmaps or any guidance to spirit or to something bigger than them to connect to any sort of higher power. They just feel like you die and you go in a black hole or something. You know what I mean? Like they don't have that given to them at an early age. I think it's a huge gift that kind of saves us, as we do have to navigate a lot of crap in the world.
Yeah, definitely, and you don't realize it when you're in it, these little things that keep us grounded, keep us holding on. And unfortunately, for people of non-Indigenous backgrounds, the thing that they get handed is a cross. And, without, a deeper understanding of what that actually means or what it actually connects to, regardless of the book and scripture we're talking about spirit level, it's hard to navigate. It's hard to get there through those channels. Obviously, Catholicism is present in my family. My grandmother was Catholic to an extent. My mother is to an extent. It's really weird. But those impressions and those things that I remember, church and stuff, were so not for me. And even at a very young age, I felt in those spaces how not for me they were. I am so sorry that my dog is barking. And really, really, yeah, without realizing it, spending time on the river, being in a tree for however long, looking for 4-leaf clovers, studying little pebbles and rocks and understanding, their journeys, those really intimate moments with nature, beginning at a very young age, have become my strongest spaces to lean into today.
Very cool. Very cool. With this year, 2025, do you feel like either your spirituality and or your tests or your work has amplified in this past year, past couple years, like through it going forward? And what does that look like for you?
Absolutely. So I used to think I don't have an extensive work or education background in any capacity at all. And I always felt like I really just had to blend in and get along to get on in the world. Again, not ever wanting to attract attention to myself for whatever reasons I felt I shouldn't. And in that world, I needed to be like that. I needed to survive in that way. But now I really feel, especially with the shift of administration, that my lived experiences and my viewpoints were meant for this time. The job that I feel like I manifested it. I'm just going to say that. The job that I'm in with CORE, that I feel like I've manifested, I had to put in work to be ready for it. And the kind of work that it is wouldn't fit in the world previously to the one that we know now, and I'm talking pre-administration and whatnot. You guys know what I mean when I say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because seeing the patriarchy tumble, for lack of better words, has been so loud and profound on so many different levels. It's shedding light on the cracks that have been there, that especially minority people have seen. It's giving space for people of color and queerness to step up and lead in ways that, like I said, weren't acceptable. I mean, weren't ready. I don't know how to, but yeah, I really do think that the work that I'm being called to do, the things that I'm doing, are very specific to the times that we're in, especially moving into Aquarius and bearing that emotion, what that means to carry that emotion into this work. Still, working with the element of water, but moving through air. I would definitely say that I'm here for a reason. It creeps me out, guys. I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, really?
Well, we're really grateful that you're here
Me too.
and on this journey with us.
Same. I'm honored. Me 10, 15 years ago never would have considered my being a person who could do the things that I'm doing, be in the spaces that I'm being, think the way that I think. I think I've always looked up to, very strong female archetypes that are leading, our world and communities in so many specific different ways. I've always, been inspired by our BIPOC and queer poets and artists of all kinds, and the things that they brought into the world. And I always wished, man, I wish that could be me. And, I just didn't think I was ready then. I was still honing and experiencing and healing. And like I said, even when I moved here, my first year with my jewelry business was the best I've ever had. And I really think it's because I've arrived. I'm here, I'm ready. And Lawrence has only helped shape me to be an even finer tipped point to do the work that I need to do.
Yeah. Lawrence is a little tiny. I mean, if people don't know, Lawrence is a little tiny blue in a sea of red, but it's also it's 87% white. And we have come a ways, but we have a long way to go before we flip over the patriarchy, before we flip over, before we actually have a town where we have leaders of color represented as much as white people, if not more, is what I want. And women too. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that you feel the calling, because it occurs in my world like you are the right person for that job, to be having those conversations and leading in that way. And I feel blessed that you're in my town as a leader, and that you have the energy to do that. I'm just praying for you and lifting you up constantly in that conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's truly my honor, to be in this community, to have this to care for it's the best.
That's a great segue into our next question is, during this time, how do you see yourself serving the community? We've talked a lot about CORE, but we haven't talked about how you were Miss Grand Chancellor at the Pride this year.
That was a really a whole full circle moment for me too. There's been a lot of full circles here in Lawrence. Kicking it back to 1982, when the very first time the tiara was placed on my head, I was crowned Oregon's baby princess. My mother got me into pageantry and modeling really young. She wanted to give me all the things she never had. That was rough because I was a tomboy underneath all of that, but also a talker. So, I was able to mend both things very well. So I definitely had a life of pageantry and etiquette school and modeling school and all of that. And, I was taught to, show up in this way and be this thing. And it was very cookie cutter feeling. And it's just in my nature to be really good at whatever it is I'm doing. I don't know why. I hate it, but I have to be good. So I was always, tried to do my best, even though sometimes I protested it. But it wasn't until I was called to be crowned prom royalty for Lawrence, for Queer Pride. And that moment when they put that crown on my head was so full circle because I was being celebrated for such an authentic piece of who I am. And it wasn't me competing with anybody or trying to prove that I was anything other than just me. This was the first year that they opened nominations to community, and I was told by a couple of the board members that there was multiple nominations for me with very lengthy paragraphs of why, which was like, that just gave me validation on a whole entire level, that just amplified the sassiness that already lives here. And then with that, with of prom royalty, I was given the honor of being the Grand Marshal for Lawrence Pride Parade this year. So that was a really incredible experience because as we were proceeding, with the parade, it was really gloomy and it was gray out and it was real moody outside, but there was no dampening the energy that was in the streets that day. By the time I got to the opposite end of Mass Street and everybody else was from the parade en masse, the sky ripped open in such a way that I felt like I was in Oregon. I felt like, I'm going to get so emotional. I felt like I was under this waterfall at Silver Creek Falls that my mom used to take me to because the chubby raindrops were they just washed everything away. Everything that day that didn't need to be carried by anybody was gone. And you just felt that. So that whole experience to me was so humbling, and it was such an honor to be, recognized that way by creator, by community. Just wow, it was a really incredible thing. So I definitely want to be sure that in all the ways that I show up, as good royalty always does, proceeding or not, I want to be a good example for those to come behind me. I want to leave, the kind of footprints that people are like, yeah, I want to get in there. I want to feel that. How do I do that? I want that. So that's where I am with that.
I'm so grateful you shared that pride story because I have over in the Substack, people can see I did a story about my pride. And it started out, I actually missed the deluge, but it started out with that whole cleansing and clearing. When I stepped out of my meeting and out into pride that day, I felt it all day. Like I felt God all day at that pride more than I ever have. And I've been to a million prides, but it was palpable. You being the Grand Marshal in that parade speaks volumes to that whole day. It was the whole day. It was like that. It was just clean, clear, powerful. Yeah. It was palpable. Palpable. That was a good word. Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
So, Monique, how can people contact you? Do you yourself mentor? Do you how can people be like, I need more of this lady. What do I have to do there? In a safe way.
I definitely
safe, healthy.
Yes, I definitely am feeling pulled to start doing some kind of just meeting of the minds. I don't know what that's going to look like or what that needs to be, but it won't go away. I definitely feel like I'm in a place where I need to connect with others who are ready to stop being idle in their journeys, who, have done the work, who have put in, the countless hours of healing and are ready to stand up and move in a very, mindful, woke way. I don't know what that looks like. I will say that a great way to get in contact with me and get involved in conversations like that is at the roundtables that I host bi-weekly through CORE. And those are at Pinnacle Woods, 5000 Clinton Parkway. Clubhouse. A lot of those conversations revolve very much around community, entrepreneurship, but sometimes we segue into mental health support, just being accountable for how we show up every day, because those things are very much part of entrepreneurship. And we need to be supported in those ways beyond just institutions that provide us information on how to. It's a much wider blueprint than people might expect. So these conversations are actually branching out to some really, really incredible groups, ones, and stuff like that.
This podcast would not be happening without that, right? That's where Megan and I met at Douglas County Core Roundtable.
There's a lot of actually really incredible connections that I'm watching come into fruition in a way that just excite me to no end. You're actually, myself and my friend Ursula from the NAACP are actively working on a BIPOC mental wellness event. This is something that I've been wanting to do since the election. My plate's been a little bit full, but I think that the reason why it keeps getting pushed back is because the right people weren't at the table yet. But I think that they're here now, so we're going to start moving forward on what that conversation looks like, and I'm really excited.
Nice. Right on.
I'm excited for that too. I will, after attending, be talking about it on the podcast.
Yeah, there we go. Right on. Awesome. So, Monique, thank you for giving us your time, your heart, your energy. Obviously, thank you from us personally because we love you and appreciate you and like see the divinity shining out of you constantly. And so bless you and thank you for giving us your time and for sharing yourself with our folks.
Absolutely. It's truly an honor, and I really appreciate you guys.